Soccer Today is powered by Spin Media. From podcast to video production, visit spinmediadigitalsolutions.com and bring your content to the next level.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo,
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. I'm Kev Laramie and I'll be joined by Duane Rollins in a second as we will preview today Qatar versus Canada, one of the last three games before the beginning of the World Cup for the Canadian men's national team. But before that, we'll invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click on that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new channel, as I am joined, as always, by Duane Rollins, sporting the adversary today, representing Croatia of all teams. Duane, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. I think this is a knockoff Croatian jersey for anyone who's really, I know it is. I bought this at Value Village for $5 a few years ago. I've always liked the checkerboard, but obviously I won't wear this in November, but it's a reminder that I think a lot of us are focused on the fact that Morocco's a beatable game. We think in our minds, we think that Belgium game's exciting because we're playing a lot of stars, a lot of people we know, we watch the Premier League, but this one's a tricky one. And they're not as old as people think. Yes, Modric is old, but he's still pretty damn good. It's a good team, and it's
As Duane is talking, he's obviously referencing Croatia being in the group of Canada, of course, in the upcoming World Cup in Group F. And I'll remind everybody of my bold prediction earlier this year when the groups were made public. I said that Canada will beat Croatia in that game. Yes, you heard it here months ago, and I stand by that prediction. Canada will beat Croatia. Canada and the young legs will beat Croatia and their old legs. But you know, this is not the Croatia versus Canada preview show. It's international break, the last one before the World Cup. And let's look at the menu for Canada, of course, on Friday facing Qatar in Austria. For Canada, it's an important matchup facing a team that could have some similarities to Morocco, and we'll break down tactically Qatar later on, and we'll look at a couple players to watch from the Qatari side. We'll obviously break down Canada's projected 11 from my exhaustive research. Duane and I have a different opinion there, so we'll of course break that down. Next Tuesday, they're playing Uruguay. Let's look, Duane, at a couple notable games across the world of soccer, of course, this weekend and today. In the Nations League, speaking of Canada's group, they're playing. Belgium is playing Wales today on the Nations League. Croatia, Denmark also in the UEFA Nations League. Morocco is playing Chile. Canada's opponents are also playing. We'll keep a close eye on the results of those games. Australia beat New Zealand earlier today, 1-0. Japan versus USA on Friday. And Argentina facing Honduras. Honduras was supposed to play 3 times in this window, Duane, but one of them got canceled. The El Salvador versus Honduras game got canceled. Great news for CF Montreal fans because it means Romel Kyoto is going to play one less game. But Argentina is the next opponent for Honduras, so a great weekend of soccer when we're looking at those notable games, but of course there's like 10,000 games in the world right now.
Yeah, I actually watched Moldova play Latvia just before I got on the air, so while I was doing some laundry. So you know, there's lots to watch there if you want. The Nations League rights are now held by DAZN, in case you're wondering what's happening on DAZN these days. Now that they don't have the Premier League, you can watch the Nations League as well as the Champions League, obviously. Look, when it comes to the Canadian games, I think I'm going to watch with interest the Denmark-Croatia game in particular. As there is this feeling out there, as I said a minute ago, that the Croatian team is older than you'd like. I don't think that bears out to when you actually look deeper at them. They have some older stars, but that's a lot of teams. I mean, hell, we have Atiba Hutchinson, which is going to be the oldest outfield player in the tournament on the Canadian team. No one's going to call us old, though, right? So, you can't just look at that. But the Croatia, in terms of the rest of this window, It's going to be a lot of tinkering, particularly among the European teams. They're teams that don't necessarily need to worry about form so much. They are looking at those bottom spots. They're looking at those bottom spots of the roster a little differently than a team like Canada. I think a team like Canada is looking at chemistry more than they are a player that can make an input. Whereas if you're looking at a team that thinks it might have a chance to go deep into the World Cup, they might be looking for someone who can step on the field and make a big difference late in the game. You get teams like France. You didn't mention the French game. France is in disarray again. This is how they work, right?
Oh, well, they have 10,000 injuries also, but they won the World Cup last time, so I guess it's you do well in one, there's drama. So we're in the drama aspect of that cycle.
Yeah, that's generally what France does, and then every 4 or 5 World Cups they win them, and that's their trend right now. So there you go. But yeah, I'll be interested to watch them as well. And obviously, I watched the Scottish game, the Scotland-Ukraine game yesterday. That was a pretty interesting 3-0 result for Scotland. They look like they continue to trend upwards. The Nations League has been an entertaining prospect. I'm glad Canada's not playing in the CONCACAF version of it this time, because it is finally, after 18 months of nothing but CONCACAF, which can have some delights at times, it's nice to have a test against something that's just a little different. Qatar isn't exactly what we would have necessarily picked, but now that it's close, it's intriguing. Let's see what they have to offer.
Especially for Canada, right? Because Canada went through the part of qualifying that included more games than the other teams in the Octo. So we've been seeing a whole lot of CONCACAF recently. But let's look at some of the players that will be available for Canada. There's been some changes. Jonathan Osorio will not be able to rejoin the team after all, still recovering from the injury we talked on yesterday's show. Daniel Henry has been added to the roster. Here is on your screen if you're watching us via YouTube or live on Twitter. Welcome to the show. And you can see it on your screen. If not, if you're listening via podcast, Daniel Henry now part of the rosters in the defenders. Goalkeepers, Borjan, Crépeau, Sinclair, that hasn't changed. Defenders haven't changed either. Cornelius, Kennedy, Miller, Vittoria, Waterman, Adi, Kube, Davies, Johnston, Larea, and Daniel Henry. Midfielders, 1 less than originally. There was 5 originally. Now there's 4, with Jonathan Osorio being left off this roster at this point. Not a lot of midfielders, but a lot of defenders and fullbacks that will be used as midfielders that we will look at the projected lineup later on the show. Stephen Eustachio, Marc-Anthony Kaye, Ismaël Koné, Samuel Piette, that hasn't changed. Those players are available for Friday's game. Charles-Andreas Brim, Tejan Buchanan, coming back from injury, hasn't played in a while, probably not available for game number 1 of the 2. Lucas Cavallini, Theo Corbanu, Jonathan David coming off a good start as always for Lille, David Junior Horlet, Luca Koleosho, Kyle Larin, who is now still finding his feet. Liam Miller and Ike Ugbo will be the latest players on this team, Duane. And of course, we're going to get to my projected lineup in a second. But do you think Daniel Henry will get any playing time? And is it a battle at this point between Joel Waterman and Daniel Henry? Or can both make the roster?
I think both could make the roster. Potentially, it depends on what the injury situations look like heading into the World Cup. We don't know yet in terms of what positional needs will be. I think Daniel Henry will probably be in Qatar. I think he'll be in Qatar because he was part of the group that got them there. I think that John Herdman knows what he has to offer. Daniel Henry has gone through stretches before in his career where he hasn't been playing as much and has generally been part of the national team setup. And I think that the players are comfortable with him and that they know what to expect from him. And I know that there are people listening to this that are going to be angry at me for pointing this out. I am not necessarily defending the choice. I'm just predicting what the choice will be in this case. I unabashedly like Daniel Henry as a human, so I would love to have him have this opportunity. But in terms of as a player, I do recognize that he hasn't played a lot of late. I do recognize that he has a tendency towards errors that tend to stand out. I have always advocated for him in the sense if you look deeper into his numbers and look deeper into his play, he's been a better player than those errors might indicate. But, you can't make a big mistake against Belgium in the penalty box. That's going to be the difference between battling for a close result and perhaps being blown out. So it's.
We've talked about Daniel Henry and the one moment per game where you're like, well, exactly. If there's one of those against Belgium, well, it could be 2-0 at that point or 2-1, and then it's a big difference for the result of that game. I want to talk a little bit about tactical trends for the two teams, Duane. over the last 10 games, John Herdman has played a very different lineup across the board. Consistency, not really. And surprisingly, because over qualifying and before the Octo, this was really different. Now, we're seeing Canada use a 4-4-2 quite often, defensively on the road, and sometimes at neutral sites over the last few months to a year now. 4-4-2 was used 4 times in the last 10 games, 4-2-3-1 2 times. But in qualifying, the 3-4-2-1, 3-4-3 setup were used more often, even a 3-5-2 situation. We have here in the last 10 games even a use of a 4-3-3 and a 4-3-1-2, which is a variant of that 4-3-2-1. So we're seeing here, Duane, a very different set of tools by John Herdman. When you see those numbers, what do you think?
I think that John Herdman is trying to emulate what he might get into a World Cup situation in terms of some of the lineups he's been using recently. When he plays Belgium in that first game, I don't think there's any doubt that Canada will be looking to hit them on a break and will be sitting back and trying to defend with numbers kind of similarly to how they played in Nashville against the United States in qualifying. I think that said, and I think that that's how they'll play Uruguay next week. That will essentially be a 5-man back. You can call that a three in the middle or 5, depending on how you want to perceive it. But it'll mostly be 5 in general, right? And then you look to get out when you can. I'm not sure how those line up in this one. 4-4-2 is how you suggested. It's possible because I think that can, depending on how you set up, be an offensive formation. I think that they will look to treat this as a preview of the Morocco game. In the sense that they will try and line up and play more front-footed to get a result into this, to get the win in a more front-footed way. As I said, I don't think they'll be looking to sit back against the Qatari team, which bluntly I don't know what to expect. But when you look at the results, they don't really inspire. So you want to get out there and beat this team and show that you can play with anyone on the team. Like, there's people out there that will say Qatar's the weakest team in the tournament. So if you go out and you don't win this game, that perception is going to suddenly come on you, and that's not necessarily something you want.
No, and when they say the weakest team in the tournament, they're not necessarily wrong. We saw earlier, and we can look at the group once again that are in Qatar, and we're looking at some teams that are not as strong as you would think, but Qatar, probably the weakest host we've had in a long, long time, probably even weakest than South Africa in 2010, because South Africa, like one listener mentioned to us, did beat France, but France was in that disarray cycle that we just talked about. But now when we're looking at the projected lineup for Canada, and here's what Duane was talking about. Yes, 4-4-2 was used 4 times over the last 10 games, and then I have looked into what is happening more often for Canada over the last few games, and I've looked at the available players. And I've used a little bit tendencies to come up with this lineup that you see on your screen here. I do believe that we will not see Tejan Buchanan in a starting role here. He's not game fit. The plan hasn't been executed yet. The plan that I'm talking about is Club Rouge technical director and their medical services, Canada's medical services, and Tejan Buchanan's agent. All together, they came up with a ramp up to 90-minute type of scenario to make him fit for the World Cup, because he's coming back from injury. Not there yet. So this is my starting 11 with a couple of different data points I came up, experience, and the John Herdman tendencies over the last year. Milan Borjan in net, a 4-4-2 here with Sam Adekugbe, Kamal Miller, Steven Vittoria, and Aleister Johnson in this back line. Why Adekugbe and Johnson as those outside center back? Because they can overlap and they have speed. Adekugbe can overlap with Davies and be efficient in that corridor, and Johnson does play as a wing back for Montreal and can overlap with Larea on the right corridor. In the midfield, Alphonso Davies, Stephen Eustáquio, Marc-Anthony Kaye, and Richie Larea, and up top, the 2 best strikers in CONCACAF, Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. I don't know why I said Jonathan David with a very Outaouais accent, but I guess it's worth it because he's from that region, though.
There you go. Yes, he is David, not David necessarily, although he's happy with either, from what I understand. When you talk about Buchanan, I think that will be the most interesting player to watch in this window in terms of whether he does play. They have been working closely with Buruga to I'm sorry, I'm going to try to say them the proper way. It's hard to get over the Bruges over the years because that's the only way I've had heard them. But they've been working closely with Brugge to make sure that he is healthy and ready to go. And that's something that both the club and the country want, because I think that Brugge wants to move him again. So they want to make some money off him. So they don't want him hurt either. So I don't know whether they'll use him in this window. I hope that he maybe gets some time, but I would rather that he train and they have a good look at him and they have an understanding where he is, and he waits a couple more weeks and gets a shot at a Brugge team that looks like they're going to be in the knockout stage of the Champions League in the winter now, depending if they can keep this going moving forward. They've had a very good start to the Champions League. We haven't talked about that in the show, but if you haven't followed it European, they have won their first 2 games, so they're doing very well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's where Caroline plays actually, right?
Yeah, that's correct too.
So on the latest graphic, it wasn't updated. It was still Besiktas because that's coming from this summer. So, but Club Brugge is Kyle Aaron's new home. So we'll see if he can continue to wet his feet properly in the first division in Belgium.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch there. Other than that, obviously, we talked a lot about Joel Waterman last week, and just to repeat that quickly, I think he really has to excel to win a position in this, because as of all the reasons I spoke of earlier in terms of fit and chemistry and loyalty towards the players that got you there, and there's something to be said about that. That said, if Joel Waterman goes out and has a complete shutdown and is demonstrating that particularly in that Uruguay game, which, if he can step up against that kind of opposition, then you have to look at him and you have to put your best forward. There's some younger players out there that I think John Herdman, because they're European based, is using this as an opportunity to see them. And Herdman's a guy that's already going to be looking ahead to the 23 season.
Just to clarify and to put names on what you're talking about, we're talking about Theo Corbanu and Luca Cogliosho, especially with what Duane just mentioned, 2 players that were supposed to make their debut or be involved earlier over the last couple of different camps, but because of different reasons, just like the time there was no camp, they weren't able to be included in the final say.
Yeah, and look, you got to always have one sort of eye to the future, even when you are a month out of a World Cup. John Herdman likely knows 95% of his roster at this point, and he will definitely give them a good role because you want to keep that chemistry moving. But you are also looking to a Gold Cup next summer, and ultimately you're going to have to start working these guys in towards a 26 bid where you will be in that tournament. Sure. We haven't heard that officially, but they'll be in that tournament.
They'll qualify anyways. But, as World Cup champions, which we will be next year, the Gold Cup is not that important after winning the World Cup,
Well, it's funny. I'm such a Canadian national team fan to the core. I'm still, even though we're a month and a half out of a World Cup, I am ultimately in my brain thinking about the 23 Gold Cup, because normally that's what I would be doing at this point. Like maybe playing some friendly, and I'd be like, okay, let's think ahead to a summer.
You still have to bitch yourself. Oh yeah, we're actually qualified. Oh yeah, we're actually going this time. We're
actually
going to
first. Yeah.
You mentioned Joe Waterman, and I want to just bring back what we had earlier this week here on the conversation, that is Aleister Johnson, and how he's been lights out for CF Montreal, and how he could be a big part of the roster in Qatar because of how they change their tactics often with John Herdman. He's versatile. He can play as a right wing back, as a pure right back. He can also play as a right midfielder, as he did in his youth, if I'm not mistaken. Aleister Johnson, of course, has been one of the reasons why CF Montreal will finish the season second in the Eastern Conference. And Aleister Johnson comes in the national team with great numbers in Major League Soccer, 47 shot creating action, and that's the number that gets me excited when at the end of those shot creating actions, there might be a Jonathan David, a Kyle Lauren, and Alphonso Davies, and coming up on that right flank, as we can look at the projected 11 once again, he could probably bring a lot of depth to the right side, and him and Larea and Kyle Lauren will create havoc on that right side, because everybody's going to be worried about the other side with Alphonso Davies. That's where Canada's depth will be really important.
You know who else will play on the right side at times during these games? Alphonso Davies, because he moves around the pitch constantly. There is no set position. As I've said a few times in this show, the debate we had for months and months and months of where Alphonso Davies should he play left back or left wing is irrelevant, because he plays everywhere outside of keeper and maybe center half. I mean, he's everywhere else on the line. and that's probably understandable. Davies, I think, too, it'll be very interesting to watch what kind of Christmas that he has. Obviously, Bayern Munich has not had the greatest start to their season. Alphonso Davies plays a very different role for them anyway than he does for Canada. He had such a long period off in the Canadian national team, didn't really make a great impact in that Nations League window that we had that I want to forget about, basically, where we had the canceled games and everything else. So that wasn't necessarily something that we wanted to see, and it was a bit of a setback from the great feeling we had up until March last year. To have him in season again, like that June window, though, I'm willing to give it and forget about it because it was the June window and everyone was dead, and it was 2 years basically of grind with COVID and everything else. So David was coming off COVID and everything, his heart thing. So there was stuff going on there. So I am also interested in Jonathan David. Well, I'll talk about him in a minute. Alphonso Davies here. Jonathan David, he is. We're in Ontario, where I am right now, constantly getting gambling ads on TV because, it's newly legal in terms of the sports gambling. Jonathan David is playing the ultimate gamble because I think he probably could have gotten a move in the summer, maybe not to the club that he absolutely wanted to. And he's decided to stick around where he is and roll out or bank on the fact, bet on himself that he can have a great World Cup, a great lead up to the World Cup, a good first half of the season at Lille, and get a move to a club that he feels that he would want to go to, like a final level club where you're not going to look to move up beyond that. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch that play out. And of course, we all as Canadian fans hope to see that happen. And I hope to see him sign for everywhere for one of those big clubs, as long as it's not the Red Half of Manchester, which is rumored. So,
which is probably where he's going to end up anyway. So, Duane, if you wish for one thing that you don't want it to happen, you know what's going to happen, right? That's exactly that thing is going to manifest itself.
He's also been linked to Liverpool, which I can somehow stomach a little bit more. But nonetheless, that's my club stuff. We'll leave that well enough alone.
All right, we can leave that well enough alone as we get set up to take a small break. When we come back, we'll break down the Qatar side of the World Cup. Well, not the World Cup, yes, but we're going to break down Qatar's team after this break because they are the next opponent of Canada, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
I want to say a big thank you to Pierre, Patrick, Martin, Jordan, Ian, Gonzalo, Glad, Dennis, Daniel, Sean, and Blue Collar Dan. Let's go. Let's effing go. As we're getting ready to break down Qatar's great team, the names I just mentioned are part of our shout out tier on our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes, and you can join them and also get access to the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast, where Duane and I, last time we had a great show, we talked about Canadian soccer business and gave more details from the structure it has and going forward. And of course, there was an announcement a few days ago regarding the negotiations between Canada Soccer and the Canadian men's national team, and apparently on September 22nd a new offer was sent from Canada Soccer to the other parties, and the details will not be made public by Canada Soccer. That's a breaking news earlier today by Joshua Cloak on social media, who is working for The Athletic. So that's probably going to be at least giving us some more water to the mill, but at least it's good news. There's a new proposal by Canada Soccer to the players. Hopefully it's a good one and it doesn't spark another strike.
As I said yesterday, I don't think the players are willing to sacrifice, for Milos Borjan, for instance, who has been suggested to be one of the ringleaders in terms of the last action. It was the older players, we were told. I doubt that he is going to necessarily give up his only opportunity to play in a World Cup by doing something silly here. So, I'm always very careful with this because I do support what the players are doing in terms of trying to get what they want. But at the same time, I have been waiting a long time. We know they're not going to pull out of the World Cup proper. So you're going to want to get these prep games in. So,
if you negotiate to have that 10 million and you pull out of the World Cup, you're not going to get 10 million. So that would be very counterproductive. All right, let's look at Qatar's last 10 games, Duane, because we look at Canada, and there's a really different here in how they played over the last 10 games. A lot more consistency for Qatar over the last 10 games. We're seeing a 3-man, 5-man backline most of the time, if not all the time. The 5-3-2 and 3-5-2 are basically the same formation, just depending where you're playing those two wing backs. But that's what I'm expecting against Canada, and of course at the World Cup. I'm expecting that 3-5-2, that 5-3-2, and of course the last time they played against the U23 of Croatia, and I'm expecting basically the same team to play against Canada in a 3-5-2 setup to counter-attack Canada's strong corridor play to have an man advantage. The 3-5-2 here, meaning that you would have, example, if you're looking at the screen right now and you look at the top of your screen, on that corridor you would have Qatar and Hatem, number 13 and number 6, being able to overtake Johnston or Larea that would be playing against them. If we line up those two, and that would be 1% advantage. That could be their tactical advantage heading into this game against Canada. But that's what I'm expecting going. And of course, we're not expert in all those names. We're not. But a couple names stand out. And I think there's 4 that we should maybe keep a closer eye on. And I will mention them now so you can locate them on your screen in this lineup. It is number 13, Moussad Kader. We'll break it down later. Pedro Miguel, better known as maybe one of the best nicknames in the world of football. Roro. Roro, your boat down the street. Merrily, 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 merrily. Rocking. All right, so Pedro Roro Miguel. Aladdin, no, not the character from Disney. That would really fit with the Arabian Nights and all, but no, we're talking about the striker. And Afif, another striker. Those are the players to watch in my opinion, and here are the reasons why. Moussab Kader as a right back, right wing back, brings a lot of speed as a 28 years old. Roro, 32 years old, one of those players that was actually naturalized. He's from Portugal originally. He's 32 years old, defensive player, defender, or sometimes as a defensive midfielder on the wing. Sometimes Roro could be a danger for Canada. Akram Afif, number 11, he's 26 years old. He scored 24 goals in 83 games for the Qatar national teams, and this leaves us with Hamed Al-Aldin, 29-year-old forward, who scored 26 goals in his club career in 88 games for Al Gharafa, who is in the top league in Qatar also. And Al-Aldin actually played for Xavi in that team, and Xavi had very high esteem of him. So those 4 players could be players to be careful for Canada.
First off, when I hear row, I don't think row your boat. I think woo like Scooby and Scooby-Doo, like oh no, which I kind of, yeah, which anyway, no, we shouldn't make too much light here, and it's probably not actually pronounced row because there are accents on there. It could be roo, I don't know. As you say, as Kevin says, I am hardly going to call myself up here as an expert on Qatari football. I know I'm supposed to say otherwise, I've done otherwise, like every other show out there, but come on, folks. I watch a lot of games, but I do not watch the Qatari league. When I do look at this team, what I see are 18 players on 2 teams. Al Sadd, I think it is, SADD, I think that's Sadd, and Al Duhali, which are the 2 biggest teams in Qatar, and that's going to suggest to me that there's going to be some continuity with these guys. That said, you look at the results, an 0-3 loss to the under-23s of Croatia. That is not a result that necessarily speaks to a team that is going to do well in the World Cup. I looked at their roster in that game versus their roster in their less competitive game. It did look like there was some rotation there, so we'll give them a bit of a break on that. But nonetheless, look, as I said earlier, it's not the end of the world if Canada doesn't get a result in this game, but it's going to be troubling to most of us because most of us, I think, I did a poll last week asking what the expectations for Canada will be at the World Cup. And, I did like 2 wins, a win and a draw, 2 draws, whatever. And most people said a win and in this window, a win and a draw, they said in this window. Not necessarily because 3 games is a different thing. Anyhow, that's very ambitious. And I think that there is still a great, and it's wonderful, like a high feeling among Canadian national team fans that this team can surprise in the World Cup. And I don't want to throw cold water on that, but the key word to that is surprise. It would be surprising if they got out of the group. It would be surprising if they got a win in this tournament. And I don't want to be Debbie Downer about it. I hope they go win all 6 games in a row. That'd be lovely. But I also live, on Earth. So I really just want to see them make us proud to go out there and compete hard and get some goals and maybe get a win. That would be great. But anything else is gravy in my mind. This game against a team that is undoubtedly, they'll have the home advantage, but undoubtedly is going to be among the weaker teams of the tournament, is going to be a true indication and a true sort of reality check for us. But they've been playing together recently more often. There's going to be more continuity with this team. It's not going to be show up and they're going to roll over them. If they do show up and they do roll over them, then I'm going to be higher on what Canada is going to do. This is going to tell us a lot. I, like everyone else, are more excited by playing, a 2-time world champion in Uruguay, a team that has Luis Suarez, despite being on the tail end of his career, a team that, you've seen and has a famous strip and all that sort of stuff. That's really exciting for next week, but this game might tell us more about what Canada is going to be in the World Cup.
Yeah, and there's a bit more expectations in this game too. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye at that result. And of course, we'll break it all down on our next show, which will be Monday, where we'll break down this game and preview the Uruguay game, Duane. And of course, already warning you, I will have detailed analysis of Uruguay and Canada's history between each other. And we will talk about Uruguay's history too, because it's fun to remind ourselves that the glorious days where they used to win Olympic gold medals, which was the World Cup kind of tournament back in the 30s and the 30s, and also we will go down memory lane on Monday and of course break it all down from all the notable games that we talked about today. We will have the result on Monday and of course statistical breakdown of Qatar versus Canada and a couple other games that are interesting to me. We will have more details on Monday. Until then, you can follow us on all the social media platform, of course, on Twitter for myself and Duane, at Kev Larame for myself, at 24th Minute for Duane, at Soccer Today SPN for this show. You can subscribe to our podcasts everywhere you find your favorite podcasts: Spotify, Google Play Store, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and all the other podcast applications available. Please take a second and subscribe to our YouTube page and join us in our journey to 1,000 subscribers. We're getting close, and with your help, we're going to get even closer. And as always, you can find this show and more on our website at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. For Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Larame, and as always, until next time, we wish you great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.